Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Demi Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Literary Blend. Today's chapter is called Luck in the Publishing Industry, and joining me on the show to have a chat surrounding this fascinating topic is Jillian Forsberg. Hey, Jillian.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited to talk to you today about luck.
Absolutely. It's going to be a delight and super interesting, and I cannot wait to get into that conversation. But before we do, I would love for you to share a little about yourself and your journey as an author so far.
Sure. I'm a historical fiction author, and my niche is historical animals. And I think one of the things that really led me into that was my childhood going into 4-H. I grew up in a rural community in Kansas. And I never really got out of loving animals. And I find that historical animals don't have a voice hardly at all. We talk a lot about specific peoples not having voices, but animals, because they literally do not speak, are often very forgotten when we talk about the past. And I have made it a really interesting journey for myself to discover more about historical animals and what happened to them, before we really knew how to properly care for them or animals in the wild and things like that. So I am really excited. My debut historical fiction novel, The Rhino Keeper, is coming out October 22nd, 2024 from micro publisher History Through Fiction. They publish true stories about real people. And my novel is about an 18th century Indian rhino named Clara, who was a real animal. And she was the only one of the species on the entire continent of Europe for about 200 years. And she became one of the first recognized animal celebrities. So she traveled around and saw kings and queens and peasants and everyone in between. And there was art made from her and broadsides and coins and medals. And, if you didn't have a hairstyle called the rhinoceros when you lived in Paris in 1750, you were out of style. She was really an interesting cultural phenomenon. And when I heard about this story, I said, where's the historical fiction book? And I could not find one. So I had to write it. And I, Demi, had never written a book before. So this is my first book. And I was told very early on, if it's your first book, don't even bother. You should just shelve it and move on. Oh, sweetie, it's your first book. Don't worry too much about getting it published. But I'm a very determined person, and I was not going to let those common things just kind of be part of my story. So I worked my butt off to get this published. And when you posted on Twitter about luck, I thought, I think that some people would assume that everything that's happened to me was lucky, but the background of it is that I was grinding a wheel and working my tail off and trying to find things that worked. And I think that luck is really when talent meets opportunity. And I think we often see authors who make it big right away, and we think, oh, she's just got lucky, without knowing the blood, sweat, and tears that went on behind the scenes before they even got a start.
Absolutely. And you touched on points that we're definitely going to dive deeper into. But first of all, that is beyond cool. I'm so interested to read the story. I will definitely be reading it. I think it's really great how you have this unique approach of exploring the historical animals, because you're right. There aren't many books out there like that. And there are so many books that touch on historical people, like you said, but the animals definitely are forgotten now that you brought that to my attention. And I think it's really awesome how you made it a point to learn about that specific animal in history and tell the story. Is it from her point of view?
No, it's really funny you say that. A lot of people that I've talked to about this are like, so does she talk the whole time? And how we can put ourselves in the shoes of a lot of people, but I have no idea what it's like to be an Indian rhino. So it's third person from the point of view of her keeper, which is why the book is called The Rhino Keeper. And he's a real person as well. He left behind no journals, very few primary sources. All we have from him are a couple of signatures, a broadside with his image on it. If I owned a rhino, I would probably detail every single day personally, but I didn't live in 1740, so maybe life would have been different for me. But yeah, so it's actually really funny. I've heard three different ways to pronounce his name. So again, I can't go back to 1740 and specifically ask him how to pronounce his name. My beta readers all said Dewey. One historical expert says "do," and someone else who lives in the Netherlands says "Douwe," but it's spelled Douwe. I've always thought in my head his name is "Do." So, like I said, I can't go back to 1740 and ask him how to say his name. So, however people want to say it is fine with me. Again, it just is what it is. So, the perspective is really his and what it felt like almost being like a unicorn keeper. Like, you have the only animal like this on the entire continent, and you're going to decide to take her around in the only covered animal wagon and display her to everyone you possibly can. It was the way that he made a living for almost 20 years of his life. So the other crazy thing is most Indian rhinos died within their 6 months of arriving on the continent, and she lived 18 years with him. So for me, looking back in time, that says couple things. One, he absolutely had to have been dedicated to her care and he had to have loved her. Otherwise, she would have died like those other rhinos did that were in similar circumstances to her. So I kind of brought those things into the book and said, what would this feel like for such a rare animal to be held by someone who's never been a zookeeper or a menagerie keeper? He was a ship captain. So it's interesting to see him evolve and care for something that's living and rare and valuable. And it's interesting to see too how royals and the barefooted peasant boys all respond to seeing this monstrous, incredible beast for the first time.
Beyond fascinating. Oh my goodness, that's so cool. Wow. Well, congratulations on not only writing this fascinating book, but finding a publishing home for it as well.
Thank you. That's been a huge accomplishment for me. Um, One of the things I think people often don't realize is that when you make a goal in publishing, a lot of the time we start with an easy goal, like I'm going to write a book. Perfect, do it. Make sure that you dedicate yourself to it. Set goals for yourself within that. But what's your goal with the book? Is the goal to find an agent? Is the goal to get it published? Is the goal to be a New York Times bestseller? What's the actual end game? For me, the end game was I wanted a book in my hands, no matter how I got there. So it wasn't I need to find an agent because, as you know, a lot of books die on submission. Just finding an agent doesn't actually mean you're going to have a published book. And there are a lot of digital only deals that happen too. But I wanted a physical copy. I want to smell that book. I want to hold it. I want to sign it. I want to see it on a shelf. I want my 90-year-old grandmother to hold it in her hands too. So I think that's kind of what set me on the path to being not only okay with a small publisher, but thrilled about it because I'm going to get a book in my hands a lot sooner than if I would have found an agent for this project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have a really great point there that it all comes down to your personal goals, and there are many different paths agented and going traditional, going with a small indie press, self publishing. There are definitely different options, and it's really great because I truly feel like no matter who is pursuing publishing, whatever path you choose, that is valid, and you should feel empowered by that choice and don't feel like you need to take a different path just because somebody else is. So I think it's really great you brought that up. So now let's shift gears into our chat about luck. And you brought up some points earlier, but I just wanted to say first that when we first think of luck, we can think of things like winning a lottery or putting our name in a hat and getting chosen, those kind of things. And that's pure luck. But when we look at publishing, that's not how it works. If that was how it worked, we would have situations where authors could enter their names, say there's a drawing for representation, and authors only represent or they only enter their names, and if they get chosen, they get an agent. And obviously, that's not how things work because if that was the case, the agent wouldn't know the premise, they wouldn't know the writing style, they wouldn't even see a writing sample, they wouldn't know the genre or age category. It would just be a totally random selection, and that lucky author gets an agent. And that's not how things work, as we all know. And so I think when we think of luck, we need to reframe our minds a little bit in the fact that it's truly hard work meets opportunity at the right time with the right person. And so I think the sooner we kind of get that in our heads, the easier it will be to accept and respect others' journeys because we're all on our own paths, we're all doing different things. And when you see others get successes, we can think, oh, they're so lucky. And they are to an extent, but it's not the luck that we think of regularly.
Oh my gosh, I'm sitting over here nodding my head like crazy. Uh, and we think that immediately. That word in our societal vernacular, luck, means like this was easy for them. Like you said, their name was just drawn out of a hat and they got representation or a New York Times bestseller or a billboard in Times Square. But a lot of the time we just see the end result. It's like the tip of the iceberg, analogy where you don't see the layers and layers of things that go down to the ocean floor, where you have an entire team of people who are working on something, where this is the author's 10th book and they're just getting picked up, or you have no idea how many they've shelved or they've, independently published on their own and this is their break and you're like, "Oh, she's so lucky." But the reality is every single author who has a finished book, they worked for that. Is it lucky that they had the time to sit down and do it? Maybe, or maybe they just dedicated themselves to it. Is it lucky that they got their dream agent? Maybe, or maybe they've queried 10 books before this one. Is it lucky? I don't know. But we see that. We see those announcements on Publishers Marketplace. We see those announcements on Twitter. We see our friends coming, to a book signing, and then there's a line out the door to meet that author. And we're like, oh, that's so lucky. And I think too, like, maybe luck and dreams are associated with each other in that way, where if you have a dream and it's accomplished, it does sometimes feel magical. And that's where that piece of luck comes into it. This is not a draw out of the hat situation, or I don't know what we would be reading, Demi.
Oh my
Like,
gosh, I know.
it would be wild. It's like, wait, why did this book get published? Oh, that was the luck draw. No, this is not the Hunger Games. Like, we do not just say, I volunteer as tribute for you to take my book instead. No. And as we know, like it's all about marketplace and if your book is going to sell and all of these things that have nothing to do with luck. And it's not just demographics, it's also, past history and making sure that everything is in place that people ask for. And that was a huge thing for me too. I don't know if my book would have gotten picked up if I would not have gone through the things that I was told to do as I got rejected. And rejection and luck do not tie into each other. However, you can learn from those rejection pieces and it might feel like luck. I think my first sense of luck personally in this author journey was in 2022. And NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, a nonprofit organization that sponsors, a big push for everyone to write 50,000 words in the month of November. They have a contest every year that your book or your premise for your book could have a professional book cover drawn by an artist. And I saw that and said, I'm almost done with my book. I'm going to use NaNoWriMo to finish it and I'm going to enter into this contest. Demi, I won a book cover.
Oh my goodness.
I know. I wish you could see my face when I opened up that email and it was like, congratulations, you've been selected for 30 covers, 30 days from NaNoWriMo. Here's your book cover. I felt like I had just been showered in 4-leaf clovers, but here's the kicker. I had to apply for that. I had to have a synopsis. I had to have a premise. I had to have like a 400-word description. And I was work, to get that lucky, I'm putting air quotes around that, lucky draw. So was I lucky? Did I get it drawn out of a hat? No. Did I feel lucky for winning a cover when my book wasn't even finished and knowing that NaNoWriMo was going to put my book idea on their blog with their huge audience? Yes. Did that get me a publishing deal? No. Did it make me feel like this was possible? Yeah. So then that little 4-leaf clover in my head, like kind of sticks around for a while, like you just got positive feedback. So the endorphins were there, especially in opening that email. That was the first good news I got related to this project. But that doesn't necessarily mean it was lucky. I still had to work on the application, you know?
Right, right, absolutely. And it's so funny because I drafted my book during NaNoWriMo 2022 that got me agented exactly a year later last year in November. And it was just a crazy thing that you had a connection to NaNoWriMo 2022, and I do too. I think
I
that's really
love
fun.
that.
Yeah. But no, I think those are really, really great points that even in those instances where you enter something and get selected, whether it's like just for short stories, submissions to anthologies, and really anything, submitting to get a book cover designed, you are putting in work before you're doing these things. You're writing that short story, you're getting your book synopsis together, you're doing all of these things. And I think that when we're looking at luck in publishing, truly what is going on behind the scenes, that's what makes it appear like luck. And for me personally, I'm very open on my social media and on my website about my journey. I run a blog where I share what I'm up to, what I'm doing, but not everyone's like that. And I think where the whole overnight success thing can come from is when you have authors and others in entertainment spaces who seem to just pop out of the blue with a book deal or with a hit song or with whatever. And you think, man, like they just woke up today and have this. What we need to remember is that those people may not be as open about their experiences and what they're going through. And so that's why it seems like they popped out of nowhere. But you have no idea how many years it took them developing their craft and making connections and putting themselves out there to get to that point. And so there's some of us seem like we are going through it and we're posting about, oh, the rejections and how long it took to get an agent or get a publishing deal. For them, it can be like dragged out and seem like it's taken so long. And then when it happens, it's this big celebration. But then for the ones that kind of just seem to pop out of nowhere and have it, I feel like those are the ones that are kind of labeled as they're the super lucky ones, but you don't know what they did to get there.
Yeah, and you and I both know writing a book is work.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't know about you, but I also have a full-time job. I'm a mother. I have 2 dogs, 2 cats, a husband, a garden, a life outside of this, realm of authorship. And to sit down and dedicate yourself to writing 85, 100,000 words, that is a full-time job. And it's so hard to, you see on Twitter like someone signed with an absolutely incredible agent and they have like 80 Twitter followers and you're like, I've never even seen you post about this journey. And I think we associate that with luck for sure. And I think it's nice to me to remind ourselves that everyone's journey is different. And like you said, we don't see what goes on behind the scenes or how hard they worked or how many online courses or what their MFA was like if they have one of those too. And I think it's a nice reminder for everyone who's querying or writing a book right now to say, you have to take this one step at a time because everyone is taking it one step at a time. Your path, full of rejection or full of luck, doesn't mean that you're any different from anyone else on this journey. You still have to start with a finished product, and that's a book. There's no luck involved in writing a book, it is just pure work. But I think within that same vein, we all have to kind of take a step back sometimes and think, okay, what's it gonna take for this book to actually make it either into the hands of an agent or a publisher or a reader, or even, if you do go the indie route to do that. I think we have to all be open to the opposite of luck, and that is criticism in my mind. Like you don't read, a beta reader's comments or an editor's comments or an agent's rejection and think anything about luck. It's not in your mind at all. Those things can be hard and damaging. And, you have to stew on it and you get that churning feeling in your belly. And it's like, where do I go from here? And you feel defeated. But I think that if you take those things and you turn them into positive things with this person says, I need to change this about my book. Maybe they're right. Instead of that almost, self deprecating, well, it's never going to be good enough. Someone just gave you their professional opinion. And I think if you do that, then that luck thing will feel easier because you've worked even harder to make this better. I don't know about you, but I can't work alone, even though you're at your computer alone. You have to have input from others because you might think this is really good, but the other readers do not. And what are we writing for? We're not writing for ourselves. I hope not anyway. We're writing for others to understand. So if someone says you need to change this, you're not going to have that lucky break. You have to be able to take that and form it into what you think the book actually needs. Obviously, not all feedback is good feedback, but I think that's a huge part of this too.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I genuinely think that it is impossible to be an author 100% alone. You need guidance, you need network connections, you need feedback and beta readers, critique partners, mentors, even. And what's really great is when you look at the progression of someone as an author through receiving all that feedback and advice, they're just growing along the way. Like for me personally, I would say that I completely committed to being an author when I attended a residency that was my MFA program before I was a graduate student. When I was still an undergrad, my professor let me come to one of the residencies on campus just to get a taste for it and see if it was something I would be interested in pursuing after I graduated from undergrad. And so I went, and this was January of 2019. And I went and I fell in love with the program. I graduated with my Bachelor of Arts in Music and Creative Writing in May of 2019, went straight into the program in June. From June 2019 to June 2022, I had mentors, I had critique partners, I was taking classes, I was growing as an author. And then after I graduated in June of 2022, I started querying, but the learning never stops. Honestly, like the more you study about the craft, reading books, going to conferences, getting feedback from agents and editors and author friends, you're continuing to grow. And I've embraced that. And I think it's really important to embrace it because if you are getting rejected, if you haven't really found your path yet, maybe it's just you need to improve a little more as a writer and learn more about the business. And through doing that, I grew and I wrote more manuscripts. And my third one got me an offer of representation and I signed in November 2023. And so it was quite a long journey from deciding I want to do this in January 2019 to signing in November 2023. That is a long period of time. I didn't
Yeah.
wake up one day and have an agent. I didn't. I worked so hard. I wrote 3 manuscripts before that. And so I think it's really great to recognize that getting the feedback and continuing to learn and embracing the learning process as an author is really great because that will never end.
When you were querying, did you ever get an agent rejection with feedback?
I did, and I applied it where it definitely fit.
Do you feel like that might be the only lucky thing about this
Right.
process?
Yeah, literally getting personalized feedback is like a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. Like you do not get that often. And what I think about is whenever I got those personalized rejections, I didn't really see it as a rejection. I saw it as this agent cared enough about me and my story to take extra time to give me personalized feedback because they get so many queries. And the reason why they get form rejections is because if you have over 1,000 queries sitting in your inbox, you would not be able to do anything else in your life other than give rejections if you offer personalized feedback to everyone. So I totally understand it from the agent perspective.
Of
But as the
course.
author, I really feel like whenever you get that personalized feedback, you are being recognized in a way, and that agent is letting you know, look, this is what I thought. These are some things you can change. And sometimes it was positive stuff too. Like, I loved the voice, but maybe the inciting incident came too soon. Okay, well, that gave me good feedback that my voice worked, and it gave me actionable feedback that I can look at and say, okay, what can I do to push this inciting incident back just a little bit to show the character's status quo more before diving into what flipped their world upside down? So, getting the personalized feedback, treat it as gold because it is, it's rare.
It's so rare. And actually, I personally think that a rejection with personalized feedback is how I ended up getting my pub deal. I had an agent send me a revise and resubmit, and I told them I work very, very quickly. When do you need this? And they gave me a 3 month deadline. Demi, I had that done in like 3 weeks because I was so eager and I had the time and I had the space. And when I got that feedback, funny enough, the very next week I had a partial request out. That agent with a partial request, um, they asked me for a full. I sent them the edited version that the other agent had requested, but was not due for deadline yet. So if I would not have sent the first query to the agent who asked for a revise and resubmit, I would have sent the old version to that agent who asked for the full. Here's the crazy thing. That agent asked for the full on a Monday. That week I had a writing conference and it started on a Thursday. She walked out of the elevator on Thursday afternoon and I spoke to her in person about my book. Is that luck? Is it coincidence? Was I just overly brave enough to go up to her and say, "Hey, you just requested my full on Monday"? It was insane, honestly. And I still can't believe that I was brave enough to go up to her. My heart was like, oh, a million miles a minute at that point. But I had a beautiful conversation with her. Now she ended up passing after I got my pub deal. But the reality was is that she sent one of the longest personalized rejection letters after I got my pub offer that I had ever seen. And it was full of glowing things. And I still like I carry that so close to my chest. The kicker too is the agent who asked for the revise and resubmit asked for that. They wanted it due in August. Okay. And I knew that the publisher that I also met at the same writing conference that I saw the agent at opened September 1st. Okay. So I sent the revise to her and I sent the same version to the publisher and they offered on that version. If I would have not gotten, a revise and resubmit or rejections with feedback, I don't know if I would still be querying or seeking publication right now because I wouldn't have known to make the changes that were asked. And those were some pretty significant changes. So again, is it all coincidental? Is it luck? Is it fate? I don't really know, but I worked to get to the version that I have today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at it that way, it was kind of a chain of events. You chose to query that agent. Then you chose to actually read their personalized feedback. Then you chose to make the revisions. I think when you look at the luck side of things, a lot of it has to do with choices and you making active decisions and putting plans into action because you're not going to get anywhere by sitting around and dreaming. Dreams don't come around and happen to you. You have to go after them. And by making choices and by taking action, these are lucky circumstances, you can say, but they wouldn't have happened if you didn't put in the work and make all the choices. So I think that's a really, really great story that illustrates all this. And one of the last points I wanted to touch on is something that I feel like we've all faced. When you know you have a story that is good, you've gotten the feedback and you've done everything you possibly could, and you still keep getting rejections, that's where it's like, why is my luck so bad? Like, what am I doing wrong? And that's where I feel like the doubts creep in. And in those instances, I think it's great to recognize again that it will happen for you when it's right for you with the right person. Timing is everything, and that's where luck is kind of disguised a little bit because it's not pure luck like we talked about at the beginning. It's the right opportunity at the right time, and you putting in the work and putting yourself out there and continue to take the shots until you get that yes.
I also think it's important to kind of remind ourselves that some of the best selling books and our favorite books, even if they're not bestsellers, they were queried 100, 200 times, and sometimes they don't get picked up and they were actually a backlist for that author and that author got picked up for something else. And this is a book they wrote 5 years ago. So I think it is all a matter of timing for sure. And maybe it's timing as in the agent that's going to pick your book up is just closed right now and you have to be patient. That patience piece is huge in any kind of publishing. I signed my book contract in October of 23. My book is coming out in a year. I wrote it in 2022. That's a pretty quick timeline, honestly. So I think people have to realize that everything is slow and your dream agent might be open to queries next summer and she's ready for your book. But that doesn't mean that you're going to get signed by just submitting to 50 more in the meantime. Like, you
Right.
do have to be really patient. And that might look like luck when that agent's like, yes, let's go for it. And then 2 days later, she's like, hey, I want a phone call. Like those
Yeah.
moments are pretty special and they feel lucky. That doesn't mean that you can't wade through the crap first because you're going to have to. So
Yeah.
my suggestion for wading through the crap, and everyone can see this on my Twitter feed, I created a rejection project. I painted a flower on a white picket
I love
fence
this.
for every single rejection that I got. I was in my therapist's office and I'm like, I don't know how much more I can handle. And she said, you have to keep going. And I said, okay, well then I have to find something positive out of this. And I was literally wandering around an antique mall and I saw this white picket fence and I said, I'm going to paint a flower every time I get a rejection. So I did. And this front and back is covered. There's like 68 rejections on there, I think. And then one offer butterfly. I'm staring at it right now. It's beautiful. But I cannot lie to you and say that with every flower I painted, I did not shed tears, because I did. But I still ended up saying, okay, I get to go paint. I get to make something beautiful out of this rejection. So when you're going through it, you do have to find positives, or quite frankly, I think you're going to quit. And
Yeah.
if you think that your story has merit, you cannot quit on it. It's timing. I hate to say it, Timmy, but it is luck when you put the work in first. And
Right.
if you continuously work on it, you can't let it sit, and you're really dedicated, and that dream is a book in your hands, or however you want to formulate that dream, if you're able to get through the negative stuff, you can do this. It is possible, but this might sound bad, but keep thinking about that moment and know that nothing will get in between you in that moment. You absolutely have to keep going. Find a positive, find a flower to paint on a fence or a buddy to vent to or something. But I think the lesson here is no one is lucky. It's all hard work, but we deserve those moments that feel like luck.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. What a beautiful note to end on. This has been such a wonderful chat, and I really think it added a lot to the dialogue surrounding luck and publishing, what it is, what it isn't, and how to embrace those special opportunities, how to continue to work hard to improve as an author, and never give up. If you believe in yourself and your story and your dreams, you will keep going no matter how long it takes. And you will feel lucky when those moments happen. You will feel lucky, and I think that's a really beautiful thing. Well, Jillian, it was lovely having you on the show, and now we have made it to the plot twist, which is a fun segment where I'm going to ask you a question you could have never seen coming. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so this is gonna be fun. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you two genres, and I want you to pair them with a kind of candy, whether that's what the candy's called, the flavor, the color, whatever comes to your mind.
Okay.
All right, so your two genres are historical and science fiction.
So I pair it with a candy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think so for historical, it has to be like a saltwater taffy that just sticks through your teeth and you're just pulling bits and pieces out of it. Like that's what I think of. Um, and science fiction, oh my gosh, well, I just can't stop thinking about jelly beans lately, because you think you know what flavor it's gonna be and then you don't. And that's how sci-fi is sometimes. Like, I think I know what's gonna happen, and then like, oh, they all of a sudden have like magic or an alien comes out of nowhere. So let's just make a saltwater taffy jelly bean, okay?
Perfect. Oh my goodness, that was a blast. Thank you so much for being on the show. Can you please share with everybody where they can connect with you online?
For sure. So I am Jillian Forsberg on most socials, except for Twitter. I am Forsberg Jillian. You can also find me on my website, and you can find more information about my book on my publisher's website, which is historythroughfiction.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again for joining me for such a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. It's been an honor.
Absolutely. And listeners, that is a wrap on this chapter of Literary Blend with Jillian, all about luck in the publishing industry. If you enjoyed our conversation, please consider leaving Literary Blend a review and giving it 5 stars to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in the publishing industry you think would enjoy the show, please pass it along to them. Thank you for listening, and until we flip to the next chapter, happy reading and writing.